Hello, Subhash here. I've been shooting Micro Four Thirds for a while, and when it came time to buy a new camera, I had the chance to exit the system. And while doing a lot of research, I actually realized that there's some misconceptions about this system. There are a lot of fake and wrong conceptions about the strengths and weaknesses of Micro Four Thirds. So today I'm going to talk about those 3 unspoken weaknesses of Micro Four Thirds and the 3 unspoken strengths of Micro Four Thirds, just to balance things out. Because in the end, after doing a lot of debating on what camera I should upgrade to from my Panasonic G85, I eventually got another Micro Four Thirds camera. Anyway, let's get into it. The first weakness, I think, is the pricing paradox. You see, there are only a handful of really good Micro Four Thirds cameras, the ones that are really worth upgrading to, especially if you're coming from something like what I had, the G85. You've already got so many boxes ticked. You just want a few additional upgrades. And when you're in that position, if you want to upgrade, full frame is actually very, very viable, because a direct upgrade to the G85 today would cost the equivalent of about $2,000 on the Micro Four Thirds side. So to me, $2,000 I could get a Nikon/Nikon Z5 II. There was the Lumix S5 II, which was coming down in price in the used market especially. S9, nobody really bought that, so it's on heavy discount all over the place. Used units going for super cheap. So there were a lot of full frame options, and Sony would open up the options in terms of lens availability should I switch systems. So the first weakness of Micro Four Thirds that nobody talks about is that it's super duper expensive if you're gonna upgrade to the good stuff. Because the good stuff has some good features, I have to say. And the good stuff is what's holding up the entire system at this point. But the problem is the good stuff is competing out there with the middle rung full frame stuff, and this middle rung full frame stuff is basically on parity with, Micro Four Thirds at this point in terms of all the little features that you get. So just in terms of feature set, I would say full frame is getting cheaper than Micro Four Thirds. It's almost a fact at this point. Like I just mentioned just now, those options, they were all around the same price. Nikon/Nikon Z5 II, even a ZF used, would have been cheaper than the camera that I ended up buying. So yeah, the first misconception, the first weakness that nobody talks about is Micro Four Thirds is too expensive for what it is. And given that the sensor is half the size, I would expect some cost savings to be translated into the product, but that's not the case. Now let's move on to the second problem that no one talks about for Micro Four Thirds, and that is the stagnant middle class. Now everybody talks about the middle class curse, which is if you're middle class, you're just going to keep being in the same wealth level for the rest of your life. That kind of feels like what's going on with Micro Four Thirds, because there's nothing in the budget to entry to mid-spec Micro Four Thirds area, that price bracket, that is remotely interesting to anyone. Now, when I first started my YouTube channel, which is not this channel, it's another channel, the camera that I was gifted was the Panasonic G85, which was a middle level camera. It had all the features you could possibly ask for. Stabilization with video in 4K with, I think, no crop at all. It had only one SD card slot, but I never had an SD card failure, so it was never a problem. It had an audio input from mic. Autofocus was okay, but it was not that great. But it ticked so many boxes. You had the flip out screen. It was just a solid performer all around. But today I look at the middle buyer of Micro Four Thirds. If you're not going to spend big bucks, not 2,000 ringgit, $2,000, sorry. If you're going to spend a little bit of money just entering the system, what would I recommend to anyone entering Micro Four Thirds? There's nothing. OM5 Mark II, if I'm going to recommend someone enter Micro Four Thirds, I would recommend them go and buy a used EM5 Mark III or something on clearance, which is what I did. I went to a clearance camera sale, and they had one display unit of the EM5 Mark III on the shelf. Pretty good condition, like just a minor scratch on the body. And yeah, I got it for half the price of a new OM5 Mark II. And what am I missing? USB-C, some one or two computational photography features, which I already have on this camera, which is my main camera. So EM5 Mark III as my secondary camera. It's like, that's what I would recommend to an entry-level Micro Four Thirds user. On Panasonic side, there's no rangefinder style cameras left to recommend. I have a GX8, which I find really, really cool, but without the right autofocus mechanism, there's no face detect on that. There's no rangefinder style GX10 or GX9 Mark II. It's just a little bit, something's missing, and Panasonic really could populate that segment, but they just don't. And Olympus is just rehashing the same thing, /OM system, whatever. They're just rehashing the same thing with such minor upgrades. So the middle ground for Micro Four Thirds is just, if you're buying new, don't bother. There's nothing there to get into that's worth getting into. It's the truth. Like, honestly, if you're gonna buy into a system brand new and you're just starting out, don't buy into Micro Four Thirds. It's such a bad deal. It's just like, oh man, go for Sony, even Canon has a full frame that's cheaper than most of the Micro Four Thirds out there. Anyway, let's go on to the third weakness, which is the size illusion. Everybody talks about how Micro Four Thirds is such a compact system, blah blah blah. I mean, let's pause for a second here, because I wrote some things which really made sense to me when I wrote them. The first thing is that compact full frame bodies are a thing. Sony A7C, A7C II, even the Lumix S9, they're all tiny. And I mean, they're kind of tinier than, the OM1. They're tinier than the GH7. And those are the four Micro Four Thirds cameras that are worth getting. The only camera that's small and flagship level is the OM3, which nobody wants to buy because it's so expensive and doesn't bring anything new to the table. So yeah, S9, it's tiny, it just needs a smaller lens, right? Okay, so just in terms of the body, Micro Four Thirds has completely lost its advantage because nobody's making a compact Micro Four Thirds camera besides the OM3, which, I mean, it's compact, but it's the wrong shape. If it was the rangefinder style or it had a proper grip, then maybe we can talk, but I don't know. Maybe just make it cheaper, OM3. And I don't think they can have that advantage, right? Because there's physical limitations to making your body too small. The moment you shrink down the body size, the first thing that goes is the dual SD card slot. So like the OM3 doesn't have dual SD card slots. And then the second thing that usually goes is the battery. So the good thing is the OM3 actually has a pretty good battery. It's the same battery that's on the OM1. But any smaller than that, like the GX8, that battery doesn't really last, especially if you're shooting 4K. And what else? Any smaller than that, GX8, GX9, I heard the battery lives are not that great. EM5 Mark III /OM5, still the same battery, and it's still not a great battery. I can shoot 4K for a while, but if I'm going to do one of these like longer videos, it just will not last. So the smaller bodies of Micro Four Thirds, that's an illusion. People say Micro Four Thirds are so small. One, the bodies are not that small. Two, full frame has already gotten smaller than Micro Four Thirds in a lot of cases with similar feature sets. The third one was the lenses, because yes, there are a few pancake lenses, and I literally have owned every single pancake lens on Micro Four Thirds, because when I decided to stay in the system, I was like, let's get the full advantage of Micro Four Thirds. Let's get all the pancake lenses, let's get some of the tinier ones that are good. And what I realized was that there's no single pancake lens on Micro Four Thirds that is without compromise. So you cannot have that size advantage without giving up something that is fundamental to the experience of having a good camera. Yeah, it's fun to have like a pancake. I had every single one, and they all had little limitations. I didn't enjoy shooting with the zoom pancakes because one, the quality was really bad, the image quality was not that good. So as a backup lens, it's fine, but I just never would mount it on my camera, because the moment you mount it on even the smallest camera you have to make it pocketable, so let's say an EP-M2 and a Pancake 12 to 32 from Lumix, that's almost no longer something that you can put in your pocket. I mean, if it's a jacket pocket, fine, but if it's a jeans pocket, in Malaysia we don't wear jackets, it's so hot here. So if you're going to put it in your pocket, it's already bulging out so much, and you really have to know your exposure triangle, and you need to know how to shoot photos well in order to get a good photo out of that combination, because it's not great glass. It's okay glass, especially for the size, but it's not that great. So in most circumstances, if you already had like an iPhone 15 in your other pocket and you took it out and you shot the same photo without any skills, just focusing on composition, you could probably get a better shot out of the iPhone than on that combination of small glass, small lens, and small body from Micro Four Thirds. And it's not like the small cameras can do video better than the iPhone either. So it's so silly to me that these camera companies that have been making cameras for decades, almost a century in the case of Olympus, I think. I don't know how old they are, but they're dead now. But yeah, they've got so many years of experience making cameras and dealing with all these things. And, in comes Apple, and they've made a product that is so much better. Even all the Android phones can outperform what Panasonic and Olympus can create in the size of something that fits in your pocket. It's ridiculous. I mean, I get it, it's not the same thing, but effectively that's what's happened. Micro Four Thirds, the advantage of smallness is out the window, because there's no small Micro Four Thirds that is worth getting unless it's just for street photography, or your phone can do most of those things. It's just for the experience, right? And I don't know, besides the EM5 Mark III, I don't think any of the smaller Micro Four Thirds cameras, to me, it doesn't make sense, because to get really good pictures, you need to have a big piece of glass in front. Like, you have to have a Pro lens or a Lumix Leica lens, then you get a proper experience, right? But with the compact lenses, the pop is not there. The three weaknesses that no one talks about: the pricing for a Micro Four Thirds that is worth getting into is too high. The entry level is completely devoid of anything worth looking into, and the lenses and the bodies and the whole lightness advantage is a myth. Micro Four Thirds is not smaller than your smartphone, and it's not small enough to have a big enough advantage over full frame in a lot of cases. Maybe we'll get into that. Let's talk about the strengths. So the three reasons why I actually stuck to Micro Four Thirds and actually bought a new Micro Four Thirds camera to replace my G85. The first one is the used market is a gold mine. You have to exploit the desperation of the sellers, because Panasonic and OM System, they don't have the market share. They're really pushing hard. They're really trying to build their base, because the base has kind of fallen away. And so what I did was I reached out to someone who was selling Olympus/OM System gear, and he told me that they had an OM1 Mark I, which was what I was looking for what it would have been close to half the price of what it was when it was new. So when I heard that, I was like, that is a deal that cannot be beat, because immediately I'm paying a lot less than the full frame options that I was looking at, like the A7C2 and the Lumix S9 and the Z5 II. Those were all around 7.5, around there, whereas this was closer to 5,000 ringgit. So I was like, okay, I'm saving so much money. I can take that savings and I can put it into the second part, which is the desperate sellers. The fact is, a lot of people are trying to get out of the system. So when they get out of the system, they kind of list everything in one go, and sometimes you can snag some good deals. So you get, not to say a big discount, but you get some discount when these items are open box or ready to be cleared out of the store, or if it's sitting in someone's dry box and they just want to switch camera systems, or they're done with photography. They just use their smartphone nowadays. You can pick up a lot of good lenses for cheap. So that's a strength. If you're into like bargain hunting on the used market, Micro Four Thirds is super exciting, because sometimes you just get rare stuff. The next reason I stuck to Micro Four Thirds is climate reliability. I shoot a lot of long form videos. Like, this video is pretty long now, but on my main channel, sometimes we shoot for 2 hours straight under very intense tropical heat, 40 degrees Celsius sometimes, and the camera is mounted on a suction cup underneath the windscreen, so it's soaking up a lot of sun rays, getting hot, And I've seen, GoPros die within like 10 minutes. My iPhone, which I shoot a lot of content with, if I'm shooting 4K 60, it'll die in 10 minutes flat. I've seen, we borrowed like a Sony a6000 something, and that shooting at 4K plus also died very quickly. So I've yet to see anything larger than Micro Four Thirds last that long in our climate. But my GH5, my G85, my EM5 Mark III, and even this, the camera that I'm shooting on now, can shoot for hours on end at 4K, no issues. Yeah, it gets warm, but no temperature warning and no shutdown. It's amazing. So nobody talks about the strength of Micro Four Thirds. They all say, full frame with a fan, it's fine. APS-C with that add-on fan at the back, it solves all the problems. But I don't have to think about all that. No add-ons whatsoever, and I can shoot for 2 hours at 4K. I think that's a strength that nobody, not even OM System, is talking about. Like the strength of your camera that I'm using right now for video. Everyone's making fun of your video capability. I'm here telling you that you can use it for stuff in here that no one else can use, and dumb. Anyway, and I think the third strength, part of the reason why I stuck to Micro Four Thirds, and particularly why I chose this camera over the Panasonic options that I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons actually is this. Micro Four Thirds has a kind of strong heritage that just reaches back super far into the camera world, because like we're all going towards smartphones now. It almost feels like an inevitability. When the new iPhone 17 Pro came out with the vapor chamber cooling the phone, like the only problem I have with my iPhone now, the only reason why I wouldn't consider using it for semi-professional content is the two things that the iPhone 17 Pro solves. One, selfie screen that can orient itself with the sensor cropping whichever way you want it. That solves the biggest issue, which is the selfie camera is so much better now. It can be used as your main camera for video. One problem solved. Second problem is heating. The older, even my iPhone 15 Pro heats up so fast when you're shooting 4K. Of course, storage is also an issue, but they bumped up the storage in this generation. So it's like, oh shoot, iPhone 17 Pro solves all your issues. That means in the 18, 19, 20, they're going to solve even more issues, and then there's no point buying a camera anymore for the kind of videos that I do. But what you lose out on is the experience of experiencing the camera industry's heritage. And at the time when I was doing my research, I was also looking into some older 4/3 gear. So if you're not aware, Micro Four Thirds was an evolution of this other system called 4/3. And I think 4/3 is actually technically the shape or the size or some ratio of the sensor. So you'd still call a Micro Four Thirds camera, the sensor on that is still considered a 4/3 sensor, the shape and size. So there was a system called 4/3 before this, and the mount of 4/3 and Micro Four Thirds is very similar. You just need an adapter with the same pins. It's just a bit of a bigger thing, and you just need it for that extra flange distance between the sensor, because 4/3 was a DSLR system, so it was not a mirrorless system. They had an actual mirror in there, like the Canons and Nikons that you think about. What I got into was this whole history of how you had Olympus moving into digital photography, and the people who created the first digital sensor, which was Kodak, was actually on board with 4/3. So they were the ones making the original 4/3 sensor. It only went into 3 or 4 cameras, camera bodies, and I bought 2 of them earlier this year. I've sold them already. Just wanted to experience them. And I also bought some of the Olympus, not to say semi-pro glass, but the nicer lenses that were on sale and I could get for cheap. I bought how many of those? I bought quite a few. I bought the Pancake 25 f2.8. I bought the 50mm f2 macro, which I still have. I bought a 70 to 300mm standard, not standard, but like kit lens quality zoom, which is not great, but it was so cheap and so light and so small that I was like, I have to have it, but I'm probably going to sell it soon. The 14 to 54 slightly advanced kit lens, and also the 11 to 22 mil slightly advanced kit lens as well. So just a lot of glass which was quite high quality, and part of this legacy of Olympus. And then it makes you think about how this system is still alive, even though some of the brands that were huge and impactful to photography and videography, I guess, how they have kind of died despite this lens mount system surviving. So Kodak died effectively, and Olympus died effectively in the camera world. And yet Micro Four Thirds lives on. You still got new products coming out. You still got lenses being produced and launched every year. Not the most sexy system of all, but it's still kind of alive. They're still selling cameras. There's still talk of new bodies coming. And OM system is not just rolling over, they're just doing what they can with the budget that they have. So being part of that system, I think, is a strength, because you got to experience, if you want, you can experience these older pieces of camera gear and mount it to newer hardware that's launched today. So part of the reason why I actually picked the OM1 Mark I over the G9 II or the GH7, which were in my short list, I was really sweating over which one to get. OM3 was up there as well. I picked the OM1 Mark I mostly because of the discount, which was the earlier point I raised. This was just over 5,000 ringgit, brand new with warranty, which is less than half price. Mark II has some additional AI features and computational photography features, and like there's rubber on one of the dials, but it's effectively the same camera, so to me it doesn't make a difference. Maybe the autofocus is a bit better, but I haven't had any trouble with the autofocus. Let me know if it's been bad, because I can see a box with my eye, so it looks like it's fine, but sometimes I wave my hand and I don't know what happens. Anyway, I chose this because I don't know whether those Panasonic cameras can work with old Olympus glass, and I still intend to use the old Olympus glass on and off, because it is very nice glass. I mean, when you take pictures with it, there's a quality to the photos that just cannot be captured. That's debatable, but it's definitely something that is special, because some of the photos that I took with some of those older lenses was really great. And part of the reason why I switched to the OM1 was also so that I could let go of those heritage camera bodies, because to me the camera bodies were really nice. Sorry, burps. The camera bodies were really nice, but dealing with CF Express was not very nice. Getting the photos off CF Express and into a MacBook with no USB-A ports, it was like dongle after adapter, and then sometimes the CF cards, the pins would bend, or you'd have some corruption in the memory, and then you'd lose your photos for the day. And then just so many issues. One of my cameras, the shutter started to get stuck, so it just got less and less reliable, because the cameras are old as well, right? So I just didn't want to deal with the aging camera bodies, but the camera lenses were working super fine. So I was like, I want to take these lenses and adapt them to a modern camera body like this, like the OM1. So if I go on holiday, sometimes I bring 1/4 lens just to use, for fun. And then I can just use Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and transfer the pictures and video to my iPad and then share them, because it's not really that professional. I'm just using it for fun, right? So it's nice, and it's a strength of Micro Four Thirds that no one talks about, that you can still adapt these old vintage glasses, but not really vintage, because they are kind of electronic, to this system, and you still have all the autofocus for photos at least. So that's this long ass rant that no one's gonna watch, but those are the 3 unspoken strengths and unspoken weaknesses of Micro Four Thirds. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.